today people are worried about safety intelligence. Will AIs go rogue? AIs today already, they've done safety experiments where the AI, if they are threatened with getting shut down, will try to blackmail the researcher, will try to bribe, beg, steal to survive, which, if you train the AI to survive and you train it to do that, why would it not try to do those things?
Exactly. No, it's never clearly definitively said, but it's hinted very strongly that there is this artificial general intelligence in the background, orchestrating and driving a lot of this and making it happen.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, Sierra founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave.
Hey, good to have you on board.
Hey, it's great to be back, Jeremy. One science fiction nerd to another.
Yeah, so basically we had this concept which is like, let's stop talking about business and let's just talk about what we're both truly passionate about, which is science fiction. So my wife eyes glaze over when I start talking to her about this great sci-fi book I'm reading. And so I'm glad maybe I have someone with you to brainstorm and talk about how it connects to today's world and for all the sci-fi nerds out there.
Yeah. I've been reading science fiction since I learned to read. So, started off kiddie stories and becoming more and more. And I definitely am a more of a hard science fiction than a space opera person. I enjoy my space operas, but hard science fiction is where it's at for me. And the reason I love it is because it lets me engage in a, kind of a thought experiment about if we change this thing, if this technology comes around, what does it do for society? I mean, Alan Kay is famous for saying that, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And hard science fiction authors are inventing the future all day long. So that's kind of why I love it and why it helps me keep kind of flexible.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I also love science fiction. I'm more like 50-50. I like my space operas. I also like my hard sci-fi. I'm just saying because, sometimes when you go hard sci-fi, because it's like getting your eyes kind of glaze over this like quantum, physiological, and then you're like, okay, like, and I think the best sci-fi, I think from my perspective is like you said, I think there's a variable which is technology, but I think the best sci-fi is where the human characters are still human and obviously humans. They still have, their hopes, their fears, their 7 deadly sins are still in play. And you see like they're not robots reacting to technology. They're just normal humans who have always grown up with this piece of technology and now they have to do something else with the other piece of technology. But I think that empathy makes it more interesting to me.
Not a question there. I mean, that is really where it's at. It's it's really, we do this one thing, we give this one thing to people, or we give this whole set of things. And how does it do? Now, sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but again and again, it forces us to think about the implications of technology, which I think is an important thing, especially in today's world where, we're looking at AI and what does it mean? And what are the implications? And how is it going to change? And it's going to percolate out and propagate and bend the world.
Yeah. And I think speaking about today's world, we're talking about a book called Vernor Vinge, Rainbow's End.
Yes.
It's a science fiction book that we both read. I got a recommendation from you. And I think the reason why we chose this book is because it's set in the year 2025.
Yep.
So when was this book?
It was written in 2005.
2005, so 20 years.
20 years ago. And the thing is, step back and think about 2005 and what was true and what wasn't true. Yeah, Amazon was there, but it was not what it is today. AWS wasn't a thing. The hot device was the BlackBerry. It wasn't the iPhone. The iPhone is 2 years out, by the way, is kind of teetering on the world of whether it's going to be around or not. I'm pretty sure it was going to be, but it's nowhere what it is today. So it's a very different world. Facebook, it's not a thing, but people being online and interacting online is happening. And so I think, Vernor Vinge sees a lot of these things that are coming, that are there or coming, and he kind of projects them forward 20 years and says, okay, what is the world going to look like?
Yeah. And I think what's really fascinating is that he's obviously, approaching it from three different ways from my perspective. I think one is obviously from academic, that's his background as an academic. So he
Computer
talks about
scientist.
university, he talks about school, and I think there's a really strong theme there. And of course, the second theme is very much as a technologist, right? Thinking about the technologies and acceleration of that. And lastly, I think he was putting together like a very human aspect character, right? Like, what would people do in this situation? Would people be proud? Would people feel sad? So I think there was an interesting set of prism, and that's why we chose this book to discuss.
Yeah. And the thing is he sets it in his hometown. So this is set in San Diego, California. This is where he lived. He got his doctorate at UCSD.
Oh.
He taught at university in San Diego. And this is where he lived his whole life. So this is like somebody, the tech noir, setting their novels in, San Francisco or New York, because that was the territory they knew. It's his territory. And so he's really saying, what is the technology going to do here?
And I think the reason why we want to talk about this, and let's talk about, I think soon in three questions, right? What did he get right? What did he get wrong? And obviously what it means, in terms of how it applies to us, technology, singularity, founders, VCs, whatever it is, right?
All that stuff.
All that good stuff. And the reason why we think about these three questions is because there's a interesting bend where he's somebody in 2005 thinking about 2025, so 20 years in the future. And there's a shocking amount he gets right. And so I think it's a good thought experiment because, if he can do it, maybe us today in 2025, if we think hard enough, can predict what the future will look like in 2045 and get, a good chunk right, a good chunk wrong, but at least it'll be something interesting to discuss. So
exactly.
Let's jump straight into this first question, which is like, what did he get right in his book in terms of teams or technology?
So I think one of the things is that he gets right, which is kind of an underlying theme, is that the rate of technological change will only continue to accelerate and will become, it'll become a driving force of society. One of one of the themes that's in there is there's one character, Juan, and his dad knew this programming language, programming system, and could write his own ticket for 10 years. And then, poof, it's gone. And his dad is chronically, structurally unemployed. And how do we, in kind of the theme also of which Vernor, Vinge as an academic is definitely thinking about, how do we educate people to prepare them for this future? So I think that this rate of technological change he gets, I think the other thing is just the nature of, ubiquitous connectivity and how that changes things and how people interact. There's a great scene in the book where kids are messaging back and forth and the teacher basically calls them out on it. Now, the thing is unlike us with our smartphones and such, their computing systems are actually in their clothes. They have contact lenses as displays and they kind of work with that. And so I think that's, an interesting thing is, what does this do to society? The ubiquitous nature of this, of connectivity, and how does it play out?
I think that is a really interesting piece because, obviously it ties into his background in terms of inventing and coining the word singularity. But I think maybe just kind of like zooming into the book itself, I think the scene, like I said, was interesting where the protagonist, effectively, whether you call him a protagonist or not, it's not very likable as a protagonist, I'll tell you that.
Well, you see, I always think of Miri as the protagonist and then Robert as the antagonist.
Everybody's like flipping through the book and I was like, who's who again? The story is, zooming in a little bit. It's just like this guy, he is was old, a poet, well-liked in his day, respected.
Acclaimed.
Again, respected.
Maybe, I don't know about respected, but acclaimed.
Okay, but high status, right? And then he goes through this set of biological treatments. He's reversed.
Well, he has Alzheimer's.
He has Alzheimer's, and then he is reverted back in age to a younger version of himself, but he finds himself dislocated because he doesn't understand technology, he doesn't understand the lingo, he doesn't understand the skills needed to even survive in that world. And
there's even this wonderful scene where they're trying to figure out what kind of interface to give him to the world. And they're like, well, do you want Windows 97? Everybody can use that.
And I think there's actually a lot of reality to that because, if you look at today's the world, it's like, a simple one would be like, do they even accept cash today, right?
Yeah,
like if you don't have a phone to do, your pay now, which is your, quick pay or a credit card, and you want to pay with cash, there's so many shops that will just be like, sorry, you can't do that.
I mean, story that I read the other day, there was this man who went to get his vouchers, because he doesn't have a smartphone. So he went to the community center to print them out.
Yeah.
But while he was walking, they got all wet. And so he's like spreading them out to try to dry them up. And someone comes and asks him, what is he doing? And, that disconnection, that digital divide, I think it really does play that.
Yeah.
I think it is still there. I think people like you and I, we don't see it, we don't feel it, but there are a lot of people who this really impacts.
Yeah. And I think that's what the book really does a good job, is like kind of like saying like this person is like so out of touch and he's being forced by the government to reskill.
Yes.
Or in Singapore, skills future.
Well, and in this world, the way they do it is they drop these people that are being reskilled into high school with high school kids.
They're like, yeah, you're about the same level, which is like barely competent. And then so we got, but of course, it's interesting because he has to learn the interface, he has to learn the lingo, and he has to learn a whole new way of thinking. And I think that's very true because, if you think about it today, it's like, if you go back, just 50 years ago, the concept of you having to know Excel to do accounting would be like, no, you don't need Excel. And 25 years ago, it became like, oh, you need to know Excel, like basic Excel to kind of like get a job. And then maybe about 15 years ago, it'll be like, you need to know the internet and Google and you need to do your own search.
Mm-hmm.
I think the past, 5 years was like, you need to be on software as a service. You need to understand really well your NetSuite or your, kind of like accounting systems,
Right.
to really get that job.
Right.
And then now it's like, it's becoming AI. And in the concept of somebody who doesn't know how to use Google, you would never get a job. But that technology acceleration is actually really fast if you think about it.
Oh yeah, it totally is. I think another thing that he really gets right, because it's part of the back theme of the book, is asymmetric warfare.
Yeah.
Asymmetric conflict, that there is this possibility, and it's alluded to multiple times through the book, about incidents that did happen and the incidents this is unfolding against. Small groups being able to literally, push the world over the edge. And I think we see this, the Houthis in Yemen and how they are literally have realigned, shipping patterns from where they were. There's a lot of push, now to no longer do the Straits of Malacca up through the Suez Canal, but can we do this around the pole?
Yeah.
How many months a year can we do that, et cetera? And I think that's something that he really got right. And that, the nature of both cyber warfare and biological warfare as being potential points where this happens.
So yeah, I think one interesting technology trend that he talks about is really the concept of bioweapons, pandemic. So I think the plot device is that, there's two, I guess, technology components. One is the rogue AI, effectively, right? That's this mysterious character.
A stranger / Mr. Rabbit.
It's the rabbit who is, the clues are clearly this is a rogue AI. And then two is he's running a bunch of transactions and assembling a team to effectively Ocean's 11, I guess, or steal a biological agent out.
I hadn't thought of that analogy, but yes, it really is an Ocean's 11, isn't it?
It's like a teenager, old man, and a weird nerd.
Exactly.
So there's a interesting montage there. But to steal a biological agent from another person who's developed that biological agent, and I think obviously there's a link, obviously, in terms of the concerns around the rogue AI side, for sure, right? I think today people are worried about safety, intelligence. Will AIs go rogue? AIs today already, they've done safety experiments where the AI, if they are threatened with getting shut down, will try to blackmail the researcher, will try to bribe, beg, or steal to survive, which... if you train the AI to survive and you train it to do that, why would it not try to do those things?
Exactly. No, it's never clearly definitively said, but it's hinted very strongly that there is this artificial general intelligence in the background, orchestrating and driving a lot of this and making it happen. And I think that's, a thing. And I think that, we'll touch on this later, but that kind of is, I think, Vinge's, kind of segue to the singularity, that happening and how it does. But I think something you said earlier to me when we were just chatting was, but there's only one rogue AI here. And today, people have 3 AIs in their pocket.
Per person. By the time we're done with this, it's going to be 5 billion AIs at least in terms of major interfaces. And who knows, is slice and dice how many ways into maybe 100,000, different companies, maybe, a million different companies servicing those 5 billion different avatar personas, right?
Exactly. No, it is definitely, there. I think another theme that Vinge touches on, and this goes actually back to some of his earlier work, it seems to be a theme that runs through, but he really picks up, is kind of the impact of what we would call social media today, but literally online communities. And, there's, this concept that he comes up, they call them belief circles. They're people that adhere to a certain belief, and they literally overlay reality with that belief. So going far beyond what we see now, for example, they literally have avatars, they have characters, they have, interior decoration that's all seen by them, but not seen by others. And that there will be these competitions of belief circles. Now, I think the thing that's interesting is he makes them very friendly. If you think about it, isn't that what's happening? People buying into a belief circle. I think in a recent conversation, you mentioned this young Chinese guy here in Singapore who basically self-radicalized into a white nationalist. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, a white supremacist to be
exact. Supremacist.
Different from a white nationalist is
they're pretty close.
But I think that's a crazy story where the Singapore government had to detain him and de-radicalize him because this person somehow managed on the internet self-radicalize him himself. And I think that's such a crazy thing, because if you take a giant step back, it's like in your white supremacist forum, they probably didn't know they were talking to a Chinese teenager.
Exactly.
Because, he had his own persona as somebody who shared the same beliefs. And so...
And literally, that's the whole thing. These belief circles literally put these personas on they're not cosplaying. They really make it their lives. But it goes even further from what Vinge talks about, where literally it's not just overlaying this reality on real reality, but literally rejecting real reality and in anything that conflicts with this reality that you have. And it's happening. People on the left want to blame it on people on the right. People on the right want to blame it on the left. Guess what? It's happening everywhere.
Yeah, and I think, this is nice because it kind of touches about what he gets right versus what he gets wrong. I mean, we'll just do it naturally here, is that I think what he gets right is, I think, the concept that people have belief circles, right? And different beliefs. And people want to belong to tribes where those beliefs are true, right? And I think there's a very astute observation. And today, obviously, we'll call them echo chambers when we don't believe it.
Yeah.
When we're positive about it, we'll call it community, a creator economy. I think there's that part that's, I think, very spot on. I think a part that is not spot on, maybe yet, but I think it's the augmented reality as being the extension of that community. So I think people are very much like, on my screen, I am very much in this, TikTok stream or Reddit. So I think there's a very much more stark divide. And the idea of us being in the same room and seeing different things about that room through augmented reality is not yet true. Obviously, some of the devices starting to come up, right? I think we see Meta is pushing hard with the Ray-Bans.
But isn't it just a metaphor for things we do see?
Okay, it's not hard sci-fi. It's not a metaphor.
No. I mean, it captures something true, which is you could have people who literally are looking at video of the same event, and they come away with dramatically different interpretations. Which to me, I often look at it and I go, well, I can't agree with your interpretation, and I can't agree with your interpretation. It's actually somewhere in here. But fact is, people just rejecting anything that challenges it. You sit on Twitter and you see someone, and it's literally, didn't happen. And it's like, okay, but there was video. Of course, we now have deep fakes and all that, which he doesn't touch. He doesn't have deep fakes as something in his.
That's true, actually. You're totally right. So in that world that he has, there's reality. There's augmented reality. Everybody has different versions of that augmented reality. People can subscribe to certain models. But there's no such thing as fake reality in his world.
I think another thing that he gets right is that the importance of trust in these communities and such. I was talking with Peng Ong the other day, and Peng was talking about his belief that the key kind of thing to the future economy will be trust. And I think that does come in here. And in fact, that, actually plays a role here, where later in the book, there's essentially a cert revocation that happens that starts taking down banks and everything. And this is essentially the fire in front of Caesar's palace to distract everybody while they try to execute their Ocean's 11 activity. But it's interesting because it's striking at trust. How do we trust things?
Now that you mentioned it, I thought it was a very nice scene they had where they broke the security certificates of one provider, which caused like a global meltdown. I mean, we saw that with the CrowdStrike, the Microsoft Windows issue where effectively, systems couldn't run, planes couldn't fly.
The stuff that we have is very fragile.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing he gets right. But I mean, there's a number of things he doesn't get right. And I think that's reasonable. I think, obviously we just talked about the, augmented reality and how pervasive it is. And his 2025 is probably 5 years ahead of our 2025. I would guess.
Say further. I don't know. It's interesting because obviously we think about Ready Player One, which is full virtual reality.
Right.
And then obviously this vision of his is more augmented reality. And I don't know if I think the jury's still a little bit out about what the end state is. I mean, probably is both. I mean, normal reality is pretty boring. So why would I not want to see, the entertainers plus K-pop plus like neon signs? I could be looking at you now and just be like, oh, I want to see a fitter, younger version of you. I'm just saying a de-aged version. I mean,
right.
I think there's something true to reality, which is like people would want to jazz up normal reality.
I think one thing that's interesting is the degree to which things are not driven by advertising is, I think, a miss. I mean, it's not an explicit miss, but it's just if you see how much of today's is driven by advertising versus in Vinge's version.
I mean, I think another part that was interesting was like, there's only one World Wide Web, there's only one interface in his plot device.
Yeah.
Versus like, no, like it didn't feel like there was like competing standards, like, I don't know, Chrome versus Safari. I don't think as a book you can run in the plot point of having multiple
browsers.
But it felt like, there's like one dominant, layer that everybody.
But if you actually think about what was unfolding in 2005, that's not an unreasonable extrapolation. It's not an.
Yeah, that's right. In 2005, it was like the internet was free. It was totally open. It felt like it was flat.
It was free.
There was no walled gardens.
Yes.
And so he extrapolated that to be like the world we have on a global, beautiful standard that everybody was just seamlessly. And I was like, no, some dude is going to be like, wait a moment, I see a reality, but I'm on, I don't know, iOS 25.
Yes.
Yours is on Android 8. And so
I can't sync with your reality.
Sorry, your model doesn't load in my reality, right?
Yeah. I think the place where he probably gets it the most wrong is in the biological sciences. And these cures that they have that are just very profound cure. I mean, we still don't even understand what causes Alzheimer's, let alone being fixing it. Now, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening. And as we see with the biological sciences, like we saw with the pandemic, something that's been in the wilderness for a long time can very quickly come to the forefront, like mRNA did. It's just not there yet. It's interesting because I think part of his theme is, how do you deal with this world where people literally are, as it were, had been in suspended animation for 20 years with Alzheimer, and then they're restored to society? How do you reintegrate them into society? How do you bring them in? I mean, the Robert Gao character is, very much the, sleeper awakes kind of theme. But we don't have that biological science yet. Now, it'd be interesting to see what that does mean. We already have, the demographic issues that we're looking at. And what happens when we do have a cure for Alzheimer's? What happens when we add 40 years onto the 80 years that people have, and people are hale and active to 120? Right now, people being hale and active up until their mid to late 70s, even into their 80s. That's there. After that, it starts going, dropping off. What happens when you have that? And I think that's part of what he's looking at is what happens when you can be poet laureate of the United States, as Robert Gao was, and then you need to have a second career after that.
I think it's an interesting piece, right? Because I love that concept of, scaling and reskilling, right? And, if you went back, I don't know, 1,000 years, most people had only one career, which was to be a farmer.
Survive.
Survive. And you had to do everything yourself. And then maybe it was like farmer and soldier, right? Because soldier to protect what you farmed. And then, so I think the concept, and then people live pretty short lives. There's war, there's famine, there's disease. And so, the concept of even having a second mountain in your career, that's what David Brooks said. Like, what is the second mountain of your career?
And now we're talking about a third mountain.
I met somebody, she had a career as an accountant, it was great. Then she had another career as a bureaucrat. And now she's thinking about what her third career is. And I was like, super fair. Like, you did 20-year run at each of them. But, you know, like, you want to do something else? Like,
go for it.
Yeah, go for it. There's a third mountain. But I do think that this sense of dislocation because of these technology trends and having to reskill, like I said, entirely from your industry skill set is a very real thing. And, you know, I find myself like just trying to stay on top of it.
I think that's, you know, the real point is, and I think this is kind of one of the themes that runs through this of constantly, you know, retooling, reinventing ourselves, and, you know, not to be doing a plug for Skills Future, anything like that, because honestly, I don't think we have the infrastructure as a nation yet to let people retool. I think there's a lot we could learn from the rest of the world there, and throwing, you know, $1,000 vouchers at it is not, you know, going to do it.
I think what is correct about the Skills Future program is like there is a quantum of capital going to somebody, and that we should focus on private providers that can be a little bit more responsive. And there's some really good programs that are out there.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of scammers out there.
There's a lot of scammers there, but scammers is, that's an execution problem, right? Hashtag sarcasm. But I mean, you kind of weed them out, right? So, but I think the real gap, if you ask me from my perspective, is like, what do people want to learn in between? Right. And I think that's a real issue, is that most people don't really want to learn. Like, even for myself, like, you know, like if I think about it, it's like, well, the stuff that would be fun to learn, like, I don't know, apparently there's certification for green tea appreciation.
Right, yeah.
And you can be like, you know, it's like an equivalent of like a
tea sommelier.
Yeah, tea sommelier, exactly. So it was like, and I was like, that would be a great second or third mountain to be a tea sommelier. Like, I could join the service economy from there. So those are the things that are like, I think, fun and people want to learn, if that makes sense. But I think there's a little bit of a gap between what people want to learn versus, I think, what the government is scared and paranoid about the economic future, and they really want you to learn, but doesn't dictate for you. Like,
right? Well, but I also think the other thing is, I think in the Rainbow's End world, it's very clear. It's you know, crystal clear, painfully clear. What is the gap people have? The gap they need to, and nobody pulls punches, and nobody is selling them shortcuts. Now, I'm sure there's this whole other piece of this world we don't see, where there are people out there selling shortcuts, go to this coding academy, etc. But it's painfully obviously clear. Now, are you going to put in the work? I mean, the question then becomes, are you going to put in the work? Are you going to expend the effort? Are you going to try to make this happen? That becomes the question. Are you going to see the need and then respond to the need? It's a different world than the one we live in.
I think the crux of it is that in the book, the government mandates that you have to study these things.
Right.
Like, literally says like, we gave you this treatment, you're back to the thing, you have to take this reskill thing. And so they define the subjects effectively, which is like, you need to be able to use the internet. And so basically there's a very top-down piece of that government.
It's interesting. I didn't see it as that much top-down, but that's, you know.
To me, it felt like the teachers was very clear, like, you got to learn all this stuff.
I thought that was more, if you want to actually function in society, you need to learn this stuff. I'm not going to force you.
We're going to both reread it now. Just be like, but the thing is, at least we both agree that the teacher was very clear, like, you have to learn this.
And maybe there was a force of government behind it, but there was also you need to do this to survive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the gap of the Skills Future piece, is like, is letting everybody decide what they want to learn. So it's very amorphous.
Right.
But there's not really like a top-down syllabus to be like, we decided that everybody needs to learn how to identify scams. You know, like that could be like a national syllabus.
So actually, recently I've started doing a workshop on AI fluency. I'm not teaching people prompt engineering or how to use ChatGPT. I'm teaching them how to interact with AI.
Yeah.
And such. And I think that's an example of one of those kind of baseline skills.
Yeah.
As we, you know, the last 10, 15 years, we've all been talking about digital transformation. I think now it's, you know, it's not going to be DX anymore. It's going to be AIX.
No, you just inspired me. What we should do is we should convert some of that Skills Future credit into a free subscription or paid for subscription to any AI model you choose.
Right.
OpenAI, Cloud, Grok. I think you could imagine a scenario where it's just like, hey, if we gave everybody an AI agent that, I mean, obviously,
if the government went and negotiated with OpenAI and with,
that'd be cheaper.
Oh
Like,
God, they could, yeah.
they put some parameters on it as
Yeah.
well.
I mean,
They-
they've already done this for the civil service. There's PAIR, which is
Yeah.
it's essentially it's Claude inside the government.
Yeah, and also they did Udemy, right, for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of like online learning courses.
Yeah.
Which is also an American service provider. So
Mm.
can you imagine, a simple one would just be like every Singaporean gets an AI model, because I think the people who are well off are already using it, already paying for it.
Right.
It's like giving everybody a laptop or
Yeah.
a smartphone, right?
And I think that the kind of an unstated theme in the back of this book is basically there are better schools. So there is the equivalent, in the book, you get the sense that there's the equivalent of the AC, JC, or Raffles, off in this corner. That's not the school we're at. We're more, probably, Temasek or National.
I think it was still like, in the book, like good institutions and everything. But I think what was interesting.
But there wasn't this, literally, we don't have access,
Yeah.
and obviously we're talking about a middle class family and everything, as opposed to, someone living in the equivalent of, rental HDB.
Yeah, you're right. I think what jogged my memory is that the book doesn't really talk about poverty, right?
No.
It's very middle class and upper middle class.
Yep.
Kind of story about suburbs, California.
This is San Diego County, quintessential suburbia, and a lot of it is set like near La Jolla and all of that.
And I think this ties well into like I think what are some of the lessons in terms of like singularity and so forth. I think the first thing that comes up to mind is that I think that when you read a book, it's this a little bit bewildering, if that makes sense, because there's so many different concepts that are happening simultaneously, right? Where it's like
there's all these threads that are in play.
It's basically like renewal of youth, effectively reversal of Alzheimer's, generational dislocation in terms of knowledge, reskilling, biotech weapons, ballistic missiles, belief circles. So there's a lot of different concepts at once. What's interesting as I think about it was that it's actually quite reasonable, actually.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
And I think the thing about reading sci-fi that's really interesting is that when you read it, because we're in 2025, you actually see a lot of it came true.
Right.
So you're not actually bewildered by it. If that makes sense.
I think if you read this in 2005,
it was super bewildering.
I remember reading it in 2005.
Yeah, and it was very bewildering.
It was like, whoa, yeah.
Oh, yeah. To me now, I'm like, same day delivery, but through ballisticness, I got it wrong. But it's doable.
Yeah.
So it's, and even this augmented reality thing, which is also quite a bit bewildering in terms of how it's written. But even so, to me, it's like, yeah, but since that it's so much easier for me to read in 2025 because augmented reality glasses already exist and devices are everywhere and everybody has 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 devices.
Yep.
And so it's much less bewildering. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I think one of the key things throughout this is from the beginnings all the way to through the end is just the pace of technological change. And I think that's actually kind of a Vernor Vinge theme throughout his works over the years. And I think that is probably the biggest thing he got right is this pace of change.
And, he coined the word singularity.
Yep.
And singularity is a big, scary word. What is singularity from your perspective? Yeah.
Okay. So I think in thinking about the singularity, it is really helpful to go back to what is the definition, where it comes from. It's actually, it's a concept in mathematics.
Yeah.
And physics. And it really is, imagine that you are, you're plotting a graph, which is 1 divided by n, as n moves towards 0. You get, closer, it gets, you get closer and closer and closer to the asymptote.
Yeah.
And then there's a point where it just goes, boom, it's over. It is the closer and closer you divide that, you get to 0, boom, you're there. And what a singularity is a place where the existing definitions break down. And, if you talk about black holes, you have a singularity there. We just don't know what happens once you go past the event horizon. So this term that he coined back in the late 80s, wrote a paper, The Coming Technological Singularity, is basically, he said, if you chart out, kind of the rate of technological change, using something like Moore's Law, where computing power doubles every 18 months, costs drops in half, and you chart that out, somewhere between about 2025 to 2030, so 2025 to 2030, it it gets undefined. The projections no longer have. And so what happens at that point? What is what happens to society? What happens to technology, et cetera? Some people would say, well, that's artificial general intelligence. But I think it's a lot more than that. And it's about the rate of change. Things are just getting cheaper, cheaper, cheaper. I mean, you think about it. I mean, here's the one I always do. When I first went to work for Apple Computer in 1986, they gave me a Macintosh Plus, okay? So that Macintosh Plus, it had a K processor that ran at 6 megahertz.
Incredible. Wow.
You compare that to today where we're talking gigahertz.
Yeah.
It had 1 megabyte of RAM, and I was really privileged. I got a hard drive that had 20 megabytes on it.
High roller.
High roller.
They really value you as employee. They give you 20 megabytes.
Yeah. Now, you think about that. I went and snapped, 10 pictures last night.
Yeah.
And I think that they each weighed in at about 20 MB each.
Yeah.
I have thousands of photos that take up gigabytes of storage on my phone and on my computer. I have a hard drive that is 2 terabytes, of which 1 terabyte is filled.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that change from 1986 to soon to be 2026. So we're talking 40 years plus, is how profound that has been. And what Vinge says, and it's true, that pace just increases. You look at how quickly things have happened since the publication of the All You Need Is Attention paper, the famous transformer paper, to what we have now with AI and how quickly it's happening, the rate of change at which these things are happening. And one of the things that Vinge talks about is the minute we get some level of generalized artificial intelligence, it will start bootstrapping itself. Now that could come about by, we create an AGI and it goes and runs, or it could be kind of the combination of human and computer. So imagine humans who have a really good interface with an LLM. What does that look like? And all of a sudden things are just happening and it bootstraps up. And the thing is, at this point, it doesn't happen gradually. It's no longer, every 18 months. It's literally things are happening daily or weekly in terms of the rate of change, or even hourly. You just get this explosive growth of capabilities and everything. And when you cross into that, we don't know what's on the other side.
And, I think that what it makes me feel is that I think technology change has been accelerating already, right? I mean, if you look at, a million years, humanity basically was flat in terms of GDP per capita. Energy consumption is you eat what you kill. Or farm. I think if you actually look at the plot of log scale of world economic history, and then of a million years, and you actually show kind of on the Y side a log scale of dollar per capita, or income per capita per person, it's literally kind of hockey shape going up, because only recently have we seen, for example, GDP per capita grow and accelerate. So lots of different things about it. But I think the part that's interesting is I think a lot of that change over the past 1,000 years, they happen generationally from my perspective. One generation is boo, and the next generation is I like this. I like the printing press.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the old generation just dies, and the new generation just takes it as normal.
No, I like the telegraph.
So I think it was that technological revolution always happened, but it was always generation by generation. And I think that's the benefit of the youth, Gen Z and Generation Alpha now. Is every generation is always going to be I've always grown up with AI. I've always grown up with whatever. I think they just have a natural, I don't know what's the word, norm set. But I think what's interesting about this acceleration of singularity is the concept of it happening within our lifetime, right?
Within a few years.
Within a few years, right? Because we live long enough, because acceleration is there, and we're still around to see it. Versus if we just died and didn't see it, then it wouldn't be a singularity from our perspective. It would just be the status quo for the new generation.
What's interesting is Vinge takes this whole idea in later books of the singularity, and he kind of plays with what does it mean. He, in fact, causes a worldwide hiccup in society because he was afraid that it was going to happen too soon for his story to play out. So it is interesting, but I think the thing is, I think if there's one lesson that we can take from this, is it's only going to happen faster. And, we need to move faster, whether you're a business, an individual, a business, a government, any kind of institution, you can't say, oh, well, we'll get to that in 2 years, because in 2 years, things might be obsolete. The things you're even talking about, we need to be operating at general principle levels, not at specific technologies or such. When I see a training program that says teach people brand X database, I'm like, no, teach them databases. If you have to use 2 different ones to illustrate it, but don't use so-and-so's database because they donated to you,
Right.
because that's currently what's hot in industry. Give them the general thing. I'm really coming back to, as you might say, teaching people meta skills that help them to learn skills and to operate at a higher level. I think understanding, I had a friend who, told me the other day, she kind of exasperated. She says, oh, Jordan, my dad came in and asked me if I knew what ChatGPT was. Oh, I went to a class on ChatGPT, and he starts telling her all about ChatGPT. And it's like, fine, but the fact is, I asked her some questions. He really, all he was taught was, here, go to this website and type in stuff and you get responses. He wasn't taught any skills about how to use it effectively, how to evaluate the quality of it, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, just throwing laptops or tablets at kids or giving smartphones to elderly people is not going to give us what we need to really take advantage of what's happening.
On that note, let's wrap things up. What's a short piece of advice that you give to folks who are reading this book or intend to read this book?
I would say, think about the theme here, Robert Gu, and then his granddaughter Miri, is them going through to be equipped to face this world, this brave new world, to quote another book title. What can you do? What are the steps you can do to prepare yourself to survive and thrive in this world that we face?
Yeah.
Because if you think about, in Vernor Vinge's, from his paper, 2025 to 2030 was when the singularity is. In his mind, there's probably in the background they're racing towards the singularity. How are we going to prepare them? How are they preparing for it? And I think, a lot of, to use a term, meta things are where the success is going to be. Do you know how to learn?
Yeah.
Do you know how to analyze? Do you know how to understand? And if you think about the classes, look at some of the titles of the classes the kids were in and what they're learning. They're not only in like what we would consider classic JC academic classes, but they also have a shop class.
Yeah.
The shop class is, they're learning how to build things. They're learning how to be makers.
Right.
And so I think, think about that. Think about that, because I do think this is the world we face. This is a very close, if you look at 20 years later, how close it is to reality, it's pretty close. Then you look at the themes and you think about what those themes, how they play out.
Yeah. I think one key takeaway is that first reading this in 2025, I think the book that was set for 2025, it felt like a near science fiction book rather than a far science fiction book. And so I think a lot of kudos goes to him for thinking this through in 2005, because he gets a lot of it right? And I think it makes me think to myself, like, okay, if you were in 2025 today, what does 2050 look like, right? What does the next 25 years look like from your perspective? And I think some things will probably stay true. I think we'll still wear jeans, probably.
I hope so.
I hope so. I love my jeans.
And shorts.
People still wear hats and things like that. So I think there's things that will still stay true. But I think the technology piece, we have to think pretty hard, because, we went from, nobody used AI, as a consumer product 3 years ago to everybody who's kind of like middle class has access to it effectively. And now, and that was within 3 years, right? And so if you had another 3 more years, does that mean, for example, does everybody in the world have it? And I'm not saying that it is, but, but what does 25 years look like? So what happens in a world where Generation Alpha or Generation AI grows up AI native? They, simple ones, right? Would they fall in love and marry their AI avatars? Would people try to be digitally immortal? This sort of stuff kind of, I say it out loud, sounds pretty crazy because they sound like far out sci-fi stuff that you watch. But then you're like, 25 years could be doable, right?
Yep. Nope, it could be.
Well, otherwise we're going to keep talking forever. At least we have encapsulated the themes for
Our audience.
Rainbow's End.
And we will have another one in the future.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to it.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.